Well, let's see. It's morning time for you and evening time here. So let's get started. And it's just a joy to be back in Australia and New Zealand. I'm pretending like I got my passport out and jumped on an airplane and got over there really fast today. It is
Mm.
a bit of a hike from here to where you are, but I just loved my time in Australia and New Zealand. It's been about 5 years now since I was last there, and I just think you, with your strong midwifery approach to obstetrical care, you just really are great leaders in the world of what we can do as providing care. So, I've been a nurse practitioner. I know you do have some nurse practitioners in Australia and New Zealand. Our nurse practitioners in the United States work a lot like your midwives do in your part of the world. And I worked as a family nurse practitioner, meaning that I was the person that might have done a pregnancy test on a family and then known them during their pregnancy. I did not provide prenatal care, but then once the baby was born, of course, provided lactation support. And then I was the person they would have come to for their well baby exam and their when their baby was sick and when mom needed a pap smear and all of that. So it was a family practice. And I just really loved that work. And by the time I quit being working in primary care, I was doing well baby exams on little babies that were the babies of um, people who for whom I had done their well baby exam. So it was a great joy for me to know people over many decades, and I feel like from that experience, I got a perspective on an approach to talking to families about their newborns, information that could be integrated into the lactation work that we all do, and certainly in the primary care kind of work that I did for years. I also had the great joy of working as a nurse practitioner and a lactation consultant teaching in a family practice residency program with family physicians. And that was also great fun because you know that if you feel like you're there at the beginning to kind of pique the interest of a family doctor or a pediatrician with a more holistic view of how we work with young families, I think it's a great honor. So that was something that gave me a lot of joy as well. So I just want to jump right into thinking about some of the families I've seen that might be familiar to you, such as this mother that says, "Why won't you look at me? You must not love me or love my breast milk." Or this mother who says, "My baby wiggles and squirms off and on all night long. I guess I better add some cereal to my breast milk." Or this daddy who says, "My baby cries more now than she did last week. It must be time to add formula." So, certainly my experience, and I imagine your experience, is that families like these are actually experiencing normal baby behavior. They are describing the normal behavior of a baby, but they are misinterpreting that behavior. And so that's partly what we're going to be thinking about today is how can we enhance the lactation care that we provide in a way that not only helps latch a baby to the breast, but helps a family understand that baby's behavior. And of course, all of us know that being a new mom in a new young family is challenging in the best of times, and it has not been the best of times the last year or so. Certainly in the United States, we saw that prenatal visits were cut almost in half. Mothers were released from the hospital. They were already released early, but then they were suddenly released another 12 and sometimes 24 hours earlier. And also, we had the experience that families were even hesitant early on to even let their mothers and mother-in-laws come into the house to help with the babies. And so talking to these families who were doing that whole project of being a new family with a tiny new baby all by themselves was really overwhelming for all, I think. So, what is it that today's parents want and need from us? And I kind of think that it's really exciting to me that today's young families really insist that we be multicultural and inclusive in our teaching of families. They don't want to see information that is limited to just one particular type of people or one particular race or religion of people. They want to feel like they are part of that world community. And that's inspiring, I think. Of course, these same young families are very committed to doing their own research and really count on information being evidence based. But I know all of us have experienced that sometimes they don't know what the evidence is. They may want evidence, but they sometimes seek out information and end up with disinformation. And then we know that today's families want us to address various learning styles because some people learn by visual, some people by listening, others by kind of hands-on kinesthetic activities. And so I think that it really calls on us as teachers and those who encourage breastfeeding to provide resources that address this range of behavior. But what these families want most of all, I think, is that we be very personal and customized in a way in our teaching of these families. They don't want to feel like what you tell me is what you tell everybody else. I want to feel that what you are telling me is special for me, that you care about me as an individual, you care about my experience as a new family. So, what we're going to take a minute to do today, we're just going to take sort of a big view of really what I've spent my career studying about, which is this connection between the child development literature, the pediatric literature, and the lactation literature. And I have been to many lactation conferences. I've spoken to lactation conferences around the world. And what I continue to hear from those lactation people is, gosh, nobody really talks that much about child development. Then I'll go to a child development conference and they won't even have anything on the whole agenda that has to do with breastfeeding. So for me, it's been a great joy to bring together these two big bodies of information. So we're going to be looking at one of those bodies of information from the child development literature, responsive parenting. We're going to be thinking about how a baby's changing development impacts the breastfeeding experience. And I'm going to share one teaching strategy that I hope you'll find interesting. So the child development literature teaches us what all of us know, which is that it matters how parents interact with their babies. And of course, what we know is that that newborn's brain is just an explosion of neurological development. Those first 1,000 days are critically important, the most learning an individual will do in their entire life. And I love this image that some of the child development people talk about. They look at this forest on the left, and you can imagine taking a walk in the woods and looking up, and you see branches and trees and leaves, and just a mass of nature all around you. But when you look straight ahead, you can't see a path. You might feel kind of lost in the woods. Whereas the picture on the right, the same dense forest, but there's that pathway. And of course, what we know to be the case is that interaction between a parent and a baby. Every single time that mother looks down at that baby and that baby looks back up at that parent, every one of those interaction creates connectedness, connections in that massive neurological development of the brain, so that now we understand that that parent child interaction is really the foundation or the core of that baby's developing emotional, intellectual, and social development. And not long ago, I was teaching my Understanding Your Newborn class to a group of pregnant couples. And when I finished teaching the class, one of the daddies says, I kind of thought that those whole first couple of months was just only about mama and the breastfeeding thing. So I didn't really know what my job was going to be. But now I understand that changing a diaper grows my baby's brain. And I love that perspective, that idea that that daddy looking down and talking to his little one while he changes a diaper is really the developing of that baby's emotional, intellectual, and social development, and how empowering it is for a new family, a new partner in a family to understand that. So the World Health Organization, I think, out with this really kind of clear way of thinking about this responsive parenting, where they say there are three steps to responsive parenting. First of all, the parent needs to notice behaviors. Then the parent needs to accurately understand and interpret those behaviors. And then the parent can take appropriate action. So let's think back about those three families we started with. That daddy who was talking about his 2 week old that was crying more this week than last week, he was actually noticing something. He was noticing an increase in crying, but he was misinterpreting that because he didn't know that a normal, healthy, full term baby can cry a little bit more when they're 2 weeks old. So, because he was misunderstanding that behavior, he couldn't really take appropriate action. And how about that mother who says, my baby was wiggling and squirming all night long. She wasn't getting a good night's sleep. Maybe I should add a little cereal to my breast milk. Well, again, that mother was noticing behavior. She was noticing that a baby was off and on squirming throughout the night, but she didn't understand about still, deep, and active light sleep, and understand that what her baby was exhibiting was wonderful active light sleep, a time when that baby's brain is really surging in development. So again, that mother misunderstanding that normal behavior as a breastfeeding problem, as a parenting problem, and therefore taking actions that are actually harmful to that developing parent child relationship. So I don't know if this video circulated around in Australia, but I love this video as an example of what responsive parenting looks like by the time you get to have a little toddler running around your house. And you can tell that this daddy spent such magical time with his little baby as a newborn, so that by the time he got up to being a toddler here, about 18 months old, he and his son were having a full out conversation, but it just wasn't in any understandable language. So this is a fella who was he and his son were watching one of those, America's Got Talent, or the British Voice movie, one of those kind of reality shows. So isn't it fun to see what responsive parenting looks like?
Did you understand it though? No. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. That's what I said. He was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? Don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh?
I love that when he says, we think a lot alike, don't we? And, it's just wonderful to see what true communication looks like, even when they're not speaking a language that the rest of us can interpret. So the literature is really very clear on this. When families practice responsive parenting, there is lower postpartum depression, increased confidence in both the mother and the partner, increase breastfeeding duration, decrease family stress, and decrease obesity as those children get older, because we know that the family is understanding that every communication is not about food in those first few months of a baby's life. And so, I sort of challenge us as lactation people. How can we bring into our lactation education these ideas of the importance of responsive parenting, so that a daddy feels like when he changes a baby's diaper, he's growing his baby's brain? It's something for us to think about. And of course, what we know is true with breastfeeding is you have to be reading a baby's body language in some way in order to be successful with breastfeeding. You've got to read those babies' feeding cues. You got to read that baby's sense of when the baby's satisfied. But what's interesting is this other research that shows that breastfeeding enhances the learning of responsive parenting. So that when they look at breastfeeding dyads later on in a baby's life compared to bottle feeding babies, is there's actually an increase in mother's responsiveness to that baby. That breastfeeding seems to help teach that mother. So then the next body of literature we want to think about is the pediatric literature. And I know many of you know my one of my favorite people ever lived on this earth, Dr. T. Barry Brazelton. And he was a Harvard pediatrician who really brought a magical way of looking at and understanding a baby's behavior. And I had the great honor to study his work for many years and to study with him a number of times. And he passed away at age 100. I was actually at his memorial service where we got to celebrate all that he had brought to our world. And so his two big bodies of information, and I'm sure many of you know this, is his neonatal behavioral assessment scale and his touch points theory. And I just want to mention these briefly because they have everything to do with lactation. So the NBAS, as it's called, is an exam that looks very closely at a baby's behavior. We look at 18 different reflexes on a baby and 28 different behaviors on a baby. And then you evaluate those behaviors on a scale 1 to 9. And you got to be just like within 1 point of your mentor who is evaluating your ability to use this tool. Now, this is such a complex tool that it's used around the world as a research tool. So it's used in situations where we can ask really important questions. What is the impact of nicotine use during pregnancy on a baby's behavior? What is the impact of neonatal jaundice on a baby's behavior? What is the impact of small for gestational age? Or a mother under stress of living in a war zone during her pregnancy? So that by looking this carefully at behavior, we could understand those prenatal impact of those prenatal experiences. So I just like to show you a couple of examples here of what I think of as just the range of what is normal. And of course, we want to have, as professionals, we want to have a real kind of sense we can get our head around what the range of normal is so that we can reassure families about their baby's behavior. So if we think about this baby's activity level. This is a baby we might consider showing here having kind of an average activity level. She wiggles a little bit, then she gets kind of still. She moves a little bit into the fencing pose. Some mothers may think, why is she just laying there? Look at this baby, though, on the other hand. This baby wiggles and squirms every time mom and dad set her down. In fact, this baby really made me laugh when I saw her, and I said, "Is she this active all the time?" Oh yeah, oh yeah. She just loves to wiggle and squirm. So that family took great joy in this baby's activity. But you could imagine another family looking at the baby's activity level and saying, do you think my baby has that hyperactivity thing that I've been hearing about? So again, having a sense of what that normal range of activity is. Here's another activity we love to look at, which is a baby's ability to orient, to look at a toy or mom or dad's face. And we'll see here this first baby was born almost 3 weeks early. And you can see he is trying so hard, but can only briefly look up at that toy. His arms are almost flaccid by his side, and his mother could feel like he can't really pay attention to the world around him. Then we have another baby here. She is so active that she can't pay attention to much because she's so distracted by her own activity. This mother thought the baby would never look at her. This is a baby, if you swaddled the baby just a minute, you see that the baby was completely able to look at a toy, pay attention to the world. And as this mother saw, this mother who was really suffering from postpartum depression, but she could see then that her baby was, oh, your baby is very smart. The baby could orient like that. Here's a little 2 week old. Again, this baby is completely able to look at this toy. His arms are beside him, but you don't have that kind of flaccid look. He really looks like he's settled his body so that he can totally pay attention to the world around him. So, those are the kind of ranges of behavior we want to understand in a baby. We want to be able to explain to a baby. That is what I learned in my INVAS training and bring those kind of skills into my lactation education. So when I think about what we want a family to understand, some basic ideas about a baby's behavior during the newborn period is one is I want them to understand a baby's sleep wake cycles and state changes. And I also want a family to understand and identify a baby's physiologic stress response. Now, I'm sure you, like I, um, learned about the six newborn states that uh, deep sleep, active sleep, drowsy, alert, uh, active alert, and then crying. Well, that was always a lot of states. And I remember saying to a mother one day, oh, well, your baby's in the drowsy state. And she looked at me and she said, I thought we were in the state of North Carolina, you know. So the thing is that the words we use matter. And the way I think about it is we can use words, we can use language that sort of invites the family to come over to our side and, kind of learn our way of thinking and talking about things. Or we can use words that kind of invite the family to enter their own world, their own language of what they understand. So I had this idea instead of talking about newborn states, I talked about newborn zones because people understand the idea of a zone, like she's in her own zone or he's zoned out, that it has something to do with a kind of a total way of interacting with the world. And so what we teach instead of those states is just simple three newborn zones: the resting zone, the ready zone, and the rebooting zone. So let's imagine that you had the opportunity to teach a prenatal class on understanding your baby, and you were able to use language that was very family friendly like this. And then here you are seeing a family say for a 2 week weight check, and you see the baby sitting on mama's lap, and the baby looks a little drowsy there, but mom says, it's about feeding time. And you look down at the baby and say, oh, it looks like your baby's in the resting zone now. Well, what have you discovered you can do to help bring that baby more toward that ready zone so she'll be ready to eat or ready to play? And the mama says, well, we talked about that in that class, and I figured out if she's kind of drowsy like this, but she's starting to show those early feeding cues, I'll just pick her up like this. and sway her up and down for a minute. And then her eyes will just pop open and I can put her right on the breast. So, again, the use of that really simple language actually made the mother a more keen observer of her baby's body language. And what about this baby? Maybe you're having that 1 month checkup now, and daddy brings in that little baby, and you kind of look over at the baby and you see that baby starting to scrunch up his face, jerk a little bit, kind of getting red in the face, and you say to the daddy, "Oh, it looks like your baby's on the way to that rebooting zone. What have you noticed, Dad?" And Dad'll say, "Well, I've noticed when I see him scrunch up his face, when I see him get a little jerky, I've noticed that if I just hold his hands together on his chest and then I just call out his name real quietly, 'Little Harry, what are you upset about, little Harry?' That many times little Harry will just calm back down." So, again, I think that this gives families language and tools to notice their baby's behavior and respond to their baby's behavior. Because the literature is crystal clear about fussing in a baby. If a family does not feel that they have tools to manage crying, that the risk for giving up breastfeeding is significantly higher. No surprise to any of us. Now, the next idea I like to communicate to parents is we want parents to understand when a baby's having what the medical literature refers to as a physiologic stress response. We know what it looks like. That baby gets a little jerky, has some overshooting of his hands. We know what that looks like. And we know the babies that are kind of at risk for that. This baby with a little bit of some neurological problem, a baby born early over here in the special care nursery, even a baby that's just under the Billy lights can have an excessive, exaggerated stress response. But once again, as that another mother said to me, "Don't tell me my baby is stressed out already." Families don't like that term stress response. So I had this idea instead of saying to a mom, "I think your baby is sending out an SOS." And SOS stands for sign of overstimulation. Now we know, like this fella here on a deserted island is trying to get some attention of a boat going by. And so when he sends out an SOS, all he's saying is, "I need a little help. I need a little help." And that's what that baby is saying when the baby shows us that physiologic stress response. So, this is what we're going to see here is a little 5 minute part of this parent education video that, well, I spent, about 10 years in my career putting together this video because I wanted to have a way of communicating this really accessible way of understanding a baby's body language. And so this is a part of that video.
The second parent skill is recognizing when your baby sends out an SOS. SOS stands for sign of overstimulation. All newborns are at times overstimulated as they adjust to being out in the world. Babies born early SOS more often. The first way babies send out an SOS is with changes in their body's skin color, movement, and breathing. This baby, who was born a few weeks early, shows these body SOSs. See how his face turns a bit red in color? His muscles jerk and shake, and his breathing gets faster. The second way babies send out an SOS is with changes in their behavior, spacing out, switching off, and shutting down. This baby demonstrates the first behavioral SOS, spacing out. Watch as Jan plays with the baby by shaking a rattle. The baby begins to look like she is staring into space. Spacing out is a sign of overstimulation. This baby demonstrates the second behavioral SOS, switching off, described in the medical literature as gaze aversion. The harder the mother tries to get the baby's attention, the more the baby looks the other way. This switching off is a sign that the baby is trying to manage the amount of stimulation she takes in. Mothers are relieved to learn what this behavior means, and that it is not a sign that the baby is rejecting her. This baby demonstrates the third behavioral SOS, shutting down. Again, we see Jan playing with the baby. Though the baby is momentarily engaged with this play, she soon begins to get drowsy and shuts down as a response to too much stimulation. When you notice your baby having an SOS, you wonder how to help. You can respond to an SOS by decreasing stimulation and increasing support of your baby. Decrease stimulation by speaking quietly to the overstimulated baby. Increase support by holding your baby's hands against his chest or gently swaying him. Putting your baby skin to skin or breastfeeding him will also decrease that SOS.
So, I want to introduce you to one of my patients here, Olivia. Now, she was a teenage mother who lived in a household with a mother who had not breastfed herself, and then was surprised by a premature baby. So, this mother was really at risk for not breastfeeding her baby. But as it turned out, she came to our class, our prenatal education class on breastfeeding and understanding your baby. And I want you to see what a sophisticated understanding of a baby's behavior this teenager had. I thought it was really special the way that Carson communicated to us as a tiny little baby. And I wondered if you would share a little bit about how you learned to read his body language and what that meant to you.
Yes, when we were talking, you were showing me some of the little signs, like him squinting his eyes, and him like moving his arms wildly and his legs. That means that he's been overstimulated. So we tried different things, like putting his arms close to his chest and swaddling him and rocking him back and forth, and that seemed to help. You can tell the difference between when he's being overstimulated versus when he's just closing his eyes and being calm.
Yeah, I remember. I love that when we talked about this, you said you were going to teach your sister and your mom, and so y'all all were paying so much attention to these little ways that babies communicate. That's great. Yeah.
Babies are very smart, smarter than what we think they are.
And isn't that what we want our families to know about their babies? That they're smarter than what we think they are. So the rest of this 20-minute video talks about understanding a baby's body language in order to prevent and solve problems around a baby's eating, sleeping, crying, and attachment. We'll see one more little clip of this video in a minute. So the second theory of Dr. Brazelton's that is so important, and I hope some of you know this theory, is the theory, his touch points theory. This is such a basic child development theory, and it so much connects to what we need to be helping families understand in lactation. So it's really a simple idea, which is right when a baby is on the surge of development, right in a baby like this baby. She's really good at sitting, but she's getting ready to start crawling. And right when she is getting ready to start this new behavior, she has this disorganization in her eating, sleeping, or general behavior. Now, this is a theory that relates to us as grown-ups too. Like the day before I was going to make this presentation, for instance, I might have been a little nervous, and maybe I didn't sleep as well last night, or maybe I didn't feel like eating dinner before I came and spoke to you today. It is normal when we're having a sort of a surge in our development that we're a little off in our eating or sleeping, or maybe a little grumpy. Now, children do this in their development. And the good news is we know when they are going to have these surges in development. We know when that baby's going to roll over. We know when that baby's going to crawl, pull up to walk, start um, making words. So the thing is, but do we have a way to teach parents about this, to help parents anticipate these changes? So then the third body of literature we want to think about is the lactation literature. And I really love this research called the Infant Feeding and Practice Study 2. It was done back in 2008 where they looked at about 1,500 breastfeeding families. And what they did was they called all of these families, each of these families every month to see, are you still breastfeeding? If you're not breastfeeding, why did you stop breastfeeding? And although this research was done back in 2008, it has been analyzed, continue to have articles coming out about it because it was such a great research model. Now, what they showed was, as you can imagine, that a mother would give up breastfeeding at a different age for a different reason. Here, the baby on the left, the mother had cracked and bleeding nipples. She never could find someone to talk to help her with to improve her latch. She gave up breastfeeding. The baby in the center had a nursing strike at 4 months. That mother misunderstood that and gave up breastfeeding. The baby on the far right, that baby started pulling up to ready to walk at about 9 months, had been sleeping through the night, and all of a sudden is getting up 3 times, sometimes even 4 times at night. Mom started breastfeeding again at night, thinking, oh, well, maybe my baby's hungry. But actually, what that baby was doing was having a surge in her development right at the time that gave her a disorganization in her eating and her sleeping habits. Now, what was interesting about each of these categories at each time period was that every mother said, ticked the box that said, my baby was not satisfied. So, see, this is really interesting that if a family sees their baby who had been, say, sleeping better at night or breastfeeding real predictably, and all of a sudden they have some shifts in that behavior, and the baby seems a little grumpy, is getting up more at night, or is coming off the breast when the mother tries to nurse, then of course that mother will say, my baby's not satisfied. And the first thing to go is breastfeeding, as we know, if the family doesn't understand that. So I was really touched by these two big bodies of literature, Dr. Brazelton's touchpoint theories and this infant feeding and practice study too, which led me to develop the roadmap to breastfeeding success, where I said, this is what, it's like any journey. You can just go off on a journey and not have a map and just kind of make your way around the world. But most of us would prefer to have a plan, prefer to know what's ahead. And so this was my idea in developing the roadmap, is that we would set it up so mothers would know, how is that baby's development going to change in the next year, and I mean, excuse me, in the next few weeks, and how will that change in the baby's development impact me as a breastfeeding mother? So here we go, from birth to 1 year. Can everybody see those slides fine? Y'all can see them? Good. All right. So let's just briefly think about that prenatal and birth period time. And of course, we want families to understand why they want to breastfeed and their personal reasons for breastfeeding. Where are they going to get support, both from professionals like you and from loved ones and neighbors and other people who are supportive of breastfeeding? And during that prenatal time, can we help turn that family on to the idea of reading that baby's body language? Of course, at the birth time, there's so much information we have to share during that time period. What are those World Health Organization's recommendations about skin to skin care, rooming in, only breast milk unless medically needing formula, um, the frequency of breastfeeding? We want that family to understand. I love this little video here of that baby's early feeding cues, bringing his hand to his mouth, starting to smack his lips, and that wiggling and squirming we know we see in those little babies that tell mother that baby's ready to eat. When we want that baby, that mother to be able to monitor the baby's stools to know the baby's getting enough calories. At that 2 week time period, we want this daddy to know that there is a normal increase of crying in a healthy baby at about 2 weeks of age, peaks at about 6 weeks, and then improves, and gets better by about 12 weeks. But in addition to understanding that this sort of surge in crying, we want to give the family specific skills to calm that baby. We want to help that family understand steps to help calm that baby. So, one thing I want to share with you is something I love, which is our Hugs Around the World lullabies. So, my husband's a professional musician. And while we had the great opportunity to take the Hug Your Baby program out to 14 different countries in 14 months, we had 70 presentations over those 14 months. And during that time, my husband would study the different musical traditions of the countries we were visiting. And then we wrote some lullabies that teach some child development concepts because, music really touches us on an emotional level. And we also know that some people are auditory learners, that they can really learn by listening. So, this video, inspired by the Korean musical tradition, helps a father understand how important dad can be in calming that fussy baby.
My daddy knows how to help when I've lost my way. He holds my hands to my chest, softly calling my name. Sometimes I feel so upset. My face gets red as can be. He helps me settle and rest, smiling calmly at me. If I am fretful or frown, getting ready to cry, he sways me up and then down, singing this sweet lullaby, holding me close to his heart. He helps me get a new start. My daddy always comes through. He knows just what to do whenever I start to cry. He sings this sweet lullaby.
And of course, in the video, when we are teaching about child development, we just show parents these steps to calming the baby. So, at 1 month, what do these families need to learn? They need to understand that babies have these two distinctive sleep patterns. They have the active sleep and they have the still deep sleep. So this is the part of the video. It actually is the part that most families love the most because they are so surprised that babies can have these distinctive sleep patterns. So what we want them to do is be able to see what these sleep patterns look like because they'll be able to spot it in their babies.
This baby shows us what still deep sleep looks like. Her body is still. She surprises her mother by not responding to any stimulation. There is no movement of her eyes and her eyelids stay shut. Her breathing is deep and regular, and she makes no sounds. Every hour or so, a newborn will transition from this still deep sleep to active light sleep. This baby is in active light sleep. Her eyes might flash open. She puckers her mouth, makes sucking movements, vocalizes, and can even smile. But this baby is not waking up. She is just transitioning from her still deep sleep to her active light sleep. In only a few minutes, we observe that she transitions back to still deep sleep. Her parents are delighted to learn that important brain development occurs during the active light sleep cycle. I would wake up every time he made a whimper at night thinking he needed to breastfeed. I just was exhausted. I didn't get any more than an hour of sleep at a time, and that was a maximum. He seemed frustrated. I seemed frustrated. We're both crying in the middle of the night. When I met with you and you started talking about the active sleep and the deep sleep, it made a lot of sense. Could you describe what it looked like to you to see him having what you think now was active sleep? Yes, active sleep looks almost like awake sometimes. His eyes even open, flash, look back and forth. His arms shoot up and they shoot down. Sometimes even a cry or a whimper. Yeah. And what I've come to realize through your training and DVD is that he can stop that on his own. And now we have a wonderful nighttime relationship.
And I love that she talked about now we have a wonderful nighttime relationship. That mother, in fact, had cracked nipples with that 1 month old ever since that baby was born. And as soon as she learned about active sleep and realized that her baby was not trying to wake up and breastfeed, that her nipples healed in just 3 days. So it's really important that we help mothers understand those sleep patterns. Over my years of teaching this material, I've had some lactation folks be worried that a mother, if she doesn't understand about that, she would get confused about early feeding cues, wiggling and squirming as an early feeding cue versus active sleep. And when I teach this to young families, I'm very clear about saying during the first 2 weeks of your baby's life, as your milk supply is establishing, those three signs of your baby being hungry, bringing their hand to the mouth, smacking their lips, and wiggling and squirming. Those are all signs of early feeding cues. You'd want to put the baby on the breast. Once breastfeeding is well established, your baby's back to birth weight, your breastfeeding is going well for you, the baby's having plenty of pees and poops, then that's the time at around 2 to 3 weeks to start observing your baby's behavior and see if you can start noticing that active sleep. If you think your baby's in active sleep, give her 5 minutes and watch her. She'll wiggle and squirm, and she might do just what we saw that baby do, go back down into deep sleep. And of course, that's what a baby has to do in order to stretch out their sleeping at night. And what about 4 months? Well, we know the two big things happening at 4 months are rolling over and that surge in cognitive development, which makes babies be very distracted during breastfeeding. And so, this is what we want to teach a mother of a 4 month old.
A 4 to 5 month old is on the way to exciting motor and mental development. Notice this baby's determination, frustration, and then surprise. By rolling over, in just a moment, the baby seems pleased with her accomplishment and is ready to explore the world from this new perspective. Rolling over often happens at the same time a baby becomes increasingly aware of her surroundings. See how she pulls right off the breast when she hears another voice? This distractibility is normal at this age. It is not a sign that the baby wants to wean. Instead, it's evidence of important mental development. Mothers learn that breastfeeding in a less stimulating environment often helps the baby settle down for her meal. Babies who are especially sensitive to developmental surges may be energized by these developmental changes and begin to awaken more at night. If a mother does not anticipate these changes, then she might think her baby is hungry and needs more nighttime calories. However, mothers who understand developmental surges can continue the breastfeeding pattern that was working before the changes began. Now is a good time to practice comforting your baby back to sleep without adding more nighttime feedings. Be sure to watch the Bumps in the Road video on this roadmap page.
So then, of course, we go on to talk about those developmental changes with returning to work, that 6 month old getting a tooth, and the mother being worried about being bitten, that 9 month old having a surge in their cognitive ability. So they have a separation anxiety or stranger anxiety, and that 1 year old learning to walk, and how families can anticipate these changes. And actually, the back of the roadmap has some suggestions about managing these bumps in the road. Now, I'd like to just take a minute to think about this idea that sometimes how we teach can be as important as what we teach. And I'm really inspired by this statement I read one time, that parents don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And what we've done here with Hug Your Baby over time is develop these three strategies that we find are really helpful in engaging parents and, excuse me, helping them understand and appreciate the amazing abilities of their baby. And I just want to talk about one of those strategies today. It's the see, then share a baby's behavior. See the baby, us as professionals, to see the baby's behavior and then to share that baby's behavior with the family. And you may be surprised that we're going to borrow some ideas from the world of sports. And this is what, of course, if you go to any football game or you're watching one on TV, you hear two conversations over the microphone. You hear the person broadcasting a player's behavior. So you might say, the player's running down the left field, pivots on his left foot and shoots the ball across the field to the forward who heads it back into the goal. So that is broadcasting. That is saying exactly what the player is doing. Then you are going to hear them commentate. You're going to see them describing the importance of what they're seeing. So you might hear them say something. We can't believe last week the player had a severe sprain of his ankle and rehabbed it all week. And look, he's out being a hero today. So explaining the sort of significance of that behavior. Now, I know you think that's kind of a far stretch to breastfeeding, but I have found that these two techniques, broadcasting and commentating, are very helpful in supporting breastfeeding. So here's a mom just came to your clinic for a 1 week checkup, and you might want to say something really sweet to this mom, like, "Gosh, you are just such a good breastfeeding mother. Oh, it looks like your baby really loves to breastfeed." So, those would be kind of general statements about a baby's behavior and a mother's behavior. But what I like to suggest is we want to be more specific about what we're seeing and what we're sharing, so that we would want to instead broadcast what we're seeing and sharing. So that I might say something like, "Oh, I see that when your baby started to wiggle and squirm, you pulled her right onto the breast, that you recognize that as an early feeding cue. Oh, I see that you are supporting your breast with your left hand, and it looks like that is making it very easy for the baby to get over the nipple and get a good latch. Oh, I see that your right hand is behind the baby's shoulder blade, which makes it easy for you to roll that baby belly to belly and have an effective latch with your baby." Clearly, you are very experienced already as a successful breastfeeding mother. So instead of making sort of a general statement, I've I've broadcasted three very specific behaviors that actually let the mother know, "Oh, this lactation consultant is paying attention to me and my baby. She is not just giving me general advice that should be given to any mother. She is noticing what I am doing with my baby and speaking to that." we find that when we teach parents we teach professionals these three hug strategies, that it makes a huge difference in families being really feeling really heard and cared for, and really giving them the feeling that you as a professional care about the experience they're having. So I'd encourage you to give that broadcasting and commentating a try and let us know how it works for you. Now, I'd just like to review some research, the research that's looked at what is the impact of teaching families about a baby's behavior? What is the impact on that developing parent child relationship in breastfeeding? So, we were really excited that the Hug Your Baby program was identified as an evidence based program. And that I'm going to send you tomorrow, send you an outline of this course with a good bibliography. One of the things we have is a review article on the medical child development and lactation literature used to develop these different concepts. But then I've been so excited over really the last, gosh, maybe 8 years, collaborating mostly with some school of nursing in the United States who have very excited students who need and want to do a quality improvement project for their doctoral program. So we've had some really exciting research come out of these schools of nursing and midwifery. One showed that when mothers were exposed to this video we saw parts of in the special care nursery, that they left much more confident in their ability to care for their baby. Because, those mamas, when they leave the NICU and the special care nursery, they think, surely one of these nurses is going to come home with me, right? So, by providing them this information, it really made a difference. Likewise, another research project incorporated reading a baby's body language into their childbirth education classes, and that increased a mother's confidence in her ability to meet her breastfeeding goals. Fathers whose babies were in the NICU participated in a 1 hour class about understanding your baby's body language, and they demonstrated an increased knowledge of a baby's behavior and confidence to take care of their baby compared to the control group. And what was interesting, the researcher noticed that the fathers in the intervention group took more photos of their baby in the NICU than did the fathers in the control group. And it was like the daddies really understood that this is a real person that I'm having a relationship with, because he was understanding that baby's behavior. Same study done in Japan showed the same results with Japanese mothers, and working with teen mothers. They love the language used in this, the signs of SOSs and those three zones. They felt like it was language that they could understand and they could become experts in their baby. Let me say one more thing about a new study that has just been completed in Japan. It was a long study with a big control and intervention group, and between three big universities there in Japan. And what they showed was really exciting is that their intervention group that used the Hug Your Baby materials had decreased postpartum depression, had decreased anxiety about their baby, and had a decreased risk of child abuse by using a tool that they evaluate that with in Japan. So we are very excited that research is just being submitted for publication now, and can't wait for that to come out. Now, there's been a number of research projects of looking at providers like us. How do we respond to increased education about how to share a baby's behavior with a family? And a big program in nursing schools showed that students who just watched a little 2 hour online course had increased knowledge of baby's behavior, increased confidence to teach families. I would love to see this program integrated into some midwifery program in Australia, because we don't have so many midwife programs here in the United States. And so I would love if any of you are connected with a midwife program, if we might collaborate on such a project. The similar results with Japanese schools of nursing and with a big doula, international doula organization. And I thought you'd be particularly interested in some research that was done with lactation specialists. We in America, we have this program called WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. And 3 out of 5 mothers in the United States is involved with this program, which is a prenatal through the baby's first couple of years of life, that has a lot of support and encouragement around nutrition and specifically around breastfeeding. And what it showed, we had 2 big states, New Mexico and Nevada, integrate this statewide into their programs. And these professionals, these lactation professionals, had increased knowledge about child development and breastfeeding, increased intention to teach about child development and breastfeeding, increased confidence to teach, and would recommend the course to others. So let's see, as we get kind of toward the end of our program here, I want to think about some resources that are available. And one thing is just to let you know from our website, we have 3 classes that are 2-hour online classes each, approved for SERP credit, helping parents understand their newborn, the roadmap to breastfeeding success, which reviews that literature, medical and child development literature, and lactation literature from the prenatal period all the way through that baby's first year of life. The lactation folks particularly like that course. And then the course that is on the hug strategies. We talked about one of the hug strategies today, the see and share babies behavior, but talks about all 3 of the strategies, has video of families, of interacting with families using those strategies. So if you need some SERP credit, that might interest you. Now, another resource that has just come together during the pandemic is what I call the digital parent resource page. And I just today created this page specifically for our colleagues in Australia and New Zealand. And what we've been doing in the United States in just the last really about 3 months is reaching out to organizations like lactation associations from different states, or the statewide WIC associations, that are able then to make these resources available to all their staff and to all their clients that they care for. And this is what is on this page. First, I mentioned to Haley when we were first, right before the course got started, is that I teach a 2-hour uh, breastfeeding preparation course virtually online, once a month. And I would certainly invite any of you who are interested in this to come and join my class. I'll send you a link to that, only it'll be kind of in the middle of the night. So if you're interested in that 2-hour class, I could send you a recording of it so that you could just see kind of a different way of teaching about breastfeeding preparation. And then on this digital resource page, I have a little summary of that, about a 35-40 minute summary that our families can be reminded of what they learned about preparing for breastfeeding. And then the 20-minute parent education video that talks about understanding and caring for your baby. But what I'm most excited about, and this is what I worked on during the pandemic, is I started with the roadmap, and I made a either 1 or 2 minute video at each of these developmental steps. And so the idea would be, for instance, if your mother calls and says, "Oh, my baby's crying, my 2-week old is crying a little bit more now, I think she wants to wean," then the lactation consultant could refer the mother to the digital parent resource page, click on the 2 week old and see this little 1 to 1.5 minute video about the normal crying of a 2 week old and tips and techniques for how to comfort the baby. And while they're there, the mother might be curious, well, I wonder what's going to happen at 1 month old that I might want to learn about. And she would could click on that and learn about a baby's active and deep sleep. So we're excited about that idea that they could come along at each of the developmental times and learn about what's going on in their baby's development then. There's so much to teach families during the birth time, right when the baby's born, that I thought you might like to see this 2 minute video that is available during right after the baby's born.
Oh, let's have a
Congratulations,
look.
your baby is here. These next few days are filled with wonder and joy and a bit of normal and healthy worry. Now is the time to take important steps to make sure you meet your breastfeeding goals. On day 1 and 2, mother's first milk, colostrum, contains important bodybuilding proteins and antibodies to fight infection. Since a newborn's stomach is the size of a marble, he eats only about a teaspoon or 5 milliliters at each feeding. Fortunately, colostrum is very concentrated and perfect for your newborn. Most babies experience cluster feeding on day 2. They want to eat more frequently when mother's milk is about to change from colostrum to more mature milk. Putting baby frequently to the breast will both calm the baby and build up mother's milk supply. By day 3, baby's stomach increases from the size of a marble to the size of a table tennis ball. Now baby can eat 1 ounce, which is about 30 milliliters at a time. Feedings will occur about every 3 hours or so. However, like most adults, baby may be hungrier or less hungry at different times of the day. Most babies need to breastfeed 8 to 10 times in 24 hours. Eat. A newborn has special ways to communicate that she is hungry. She might bring her hand up to her mouth, smack her lips, or wiggle and squirm like this when she is ready to eat. Early swaddling or pacifier use makes it harder for the baby to communicate those important early signs of hunger. Therefore, most professionals recommend delaying swaddling, pacifier use, and feeding with a bottle until breastfeeding is well established, at about 2 weeks of age. Bringing baby immediately to the breast after birth, practicing lots of skin to skin time, and providing only breast milk unless you have a medical problem to address will increase your milk production and help you build a good milk supply. Family, friends, and professionals are here to help you on your breastfeeding journey. But remember, your baby can be your greatest teacher. Watching for early signs of hunger and keeping track of baby's wet diapers and of the number and color of baby's stools will reassure you that your baby is getting plenty to eat. Contact your medical provider or a lactation specialist if you have any breastfeeding concerns when you get home.
So
Congratulations.
I put together this sort of silly video, but I think the idea was to sort of capture how a professional could use these resources with a family.
It's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and a mother with a 4-month-old calls and says, I'm so worried. I think my baby wants to wean. She explains that every time the baby goes on the breast, she'll pull off the breast and look all around the room. Do you think that means she wants to wean?
How can you effectively and efficiently reassure this mother that she is describing normal behavior in a 4-month-old and give her tips on what actions to take? Hug Your Baby has created a digital parent resources page available in both English and Spanish. First, you will find Understanding and Caring for Your Newborn, an award-winning 20-minute video that helps parents read their baby's body language in order to prevent and solve problems around their baby's eating, sleeping, crying, and attachment. A handout that recaps this video can be read online or downloaded. The next parent resource is the Roadmap to Breastfeeding Success, a graphic that highlights how a baby's changing development impacts the breastfeeding experience. Notice the handout items in red. Short age-specific videos explain and problem solve around each of these developmental events. The Hug Your Baby digital resources page also helps parents through an e-newsletter series from birth to 1 year. These 12 newsletters offer stories from families like their own, who have come to understand and to manage these bumps in the road. Finally, your clients are able to explore two Hugs Around the World lullabies that teach child development concepts while sharing world music traditions. Now let's return to this worried mother, the one who called you at 4 o'clock on Friday. Now you can easily send her a link to the Roadmap to Breastfeeding Success information and point out the video on the normal distractibility of a 4 month old. You can also show her where to read the 4 month old newsletter about a mother who faced this same problem.
Oh, your baby's not ready to wean. Both you and your baby love breastfeeding.
You just helped this mother meet her breastfeeding goals, and you did it in just a few minutes. At Hug Your Baby, we hope and expect that the families you serve will benefit from the Digital Parent Resources page, return to it many times in their baby's first year of life, and appreciate the encouragement and information you offer them in their journey to breastfeeding success.
I'll be happy. I'll be hanging around a minute. But the last thing we'll do before you leave is I love this video. This video helps us think about those 10 steps that we all know are critically important. The World Health Organization helped us understand those 10 steps that are so important to setting a family off to successful breastfeeding. So, this is the video my husband put together to remind us of those amazing 10 steps. So, this will be the end of our program. And if any of you has a quick question afterwards, I'll be happy to hang with you. And I was going to speak with Barb just a minute so I can make sure I got that list of everyone who signed up. So here we go. Bye bye.